Guys, Erin here, back with another moon update for you. I'm going to be talking about the new moon we've got coming up here on Thursday, September 14th. It peaks at 6:39 p.m. Pacific time, and this new moon is in the sign of Virgo, 21 degrees Virgo. So with that said, this is a time to manifest new beginnings or growth that are related to this sign of Virgo. What happens is this is the new moon in Virgo. Approximately 6 months from now, we will have a full moon in the sign of Virgo. That will be the peak of this growth cycle. Okay, so this is a time when preferably the hours leading up to this new moon, we pull out our journals, we write down the growth that we want to experience that's related to this sign of Virgo. Okay, now for those of you who are a little more advanced, you can apply this to your own natal chart. You want to see which house in your natal chart the sign of Virgo comes through. Okay, if you're using Placidus, then you need to see exactly where 21 degrees Virgo comes through. Personally, when it comes to these lunar transits, I like working with the whole sign house system. I love Placidus. I love Regiomontanus. I work with different house systems depending on the work that I'm doing. But when it comes to, again, these lunar transits, I find that using the whole sign house system tends to manifest most accurately, especially when we're talking about medical astrology. Okay, so you can apply this to your own natal chart by seeing which house in your natal chart this sign of Virgo comes through. Could be coming through your house of physical health, your house of self, if you're a Virgo rising. Could be coming through your house of career, your house of money, your house of relationships, your house of karma, your house of communication. There's all these different areas of your life where this could be coming through. Now, of course, we all experience new moons together as a collective, but it's also, of course, very unique to each and every one of us. And this is how we can figure out how it's manifesting for you specifically. Now, if that's too much for you, if that sounds like overwhelming or, overstimulating or something, then don't worry about it. That's perfectly okay. We learn astrology with baby steps. You can just focus on the time for new Virgoan beginnings, okay? And if you're curious about what I'm talking about and you want to learn what I'm talking about, I will be teaching a series of 6 classes for the Academy of Astrological Medicine, or Academy for Astrological Medicine. These classes are going to start on Monday, September 18th. Okay, we're going to meet every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time for 1 hour. And what I'm going to be doing is teaching you guys how to learn this stuff for yourself. I'm going to teach you how to read a natal chart. Now, for those of you who are kind of specifically curious about medical astrology, this is an excellent introduction to that, but it certainly doesn't have to only be for medical astrology. The stuff I'm going to be teaching is basically just the core roots of astrology, something that's quite complicated, but I'm putting it in the most simple format for you guys to be able to easily process this information. Okay, so there's that. If you want to sign up for these classes, I will leave a link in the description, or you can just go to the academyforastrologicalmedicine.com, or you can just go to judithhillastrology.com and you'll find access to those classes. And not only that, but it's very affordable. And if you can't pay for the whole thing at once, they offer a system, like a payment program that you can get on, but it is very affordable. So you might want to check that out. Okay. So in this recording, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down this sign of Virgo for you, so you know what you're working with here. Okay. We're talking about the sign of physical health and being of service. Okay. But I'll go into detail on that. So we're going to break down the sign of Virgo for you. I'm also going to pull up the chart so that you can see some other prominent astrological forces that we will be receiving at the time of this new moon. Boy, oh boy, do we still have a lot of retrogrades going on. Okay, so we'll go into that. But I'm also going to be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Virgo, because these parts of our body become more sensitive anytime the moon transits through the sign of Virgo, which she does. For those of you who aren't aware of this, the moon transits through every single zodiac sign every single month. Okay, and when she transits through those zodiac signs, these parts of our body, whatever parts of our body are ruled by the sign she's transiting through, become more sensitive. But it's definitely most prominent when it's a new or a full moon. Okay, so this is a new moon in the sign of Virgo, and boy, oh boy, does Virgo rule a lot of very important parts of our body. So I'll get into that. I will also be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body while we experience this lunar transit. And of course, I will also be bringing up some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Virgo. For those of you who are not aware of this, every single time we have a new moon, and I just went through this a couple weeks ago, that I have been pulling out my journal every single new moon and full moon all the way since June of 2015. Specifically for new moons, I'm writing down what I want to manifest that's related to that zodiac sign. And of course, I apply it into my own natal chart. And I kid you not, I would just not be continuing to do this because it's a little bit time consuming to pull out our journal and write this stuff down. But I would not continue to do it if I didn't see such incredible results. Okay, so there's that. And what I like to do with the gemstones is I'll take the gemstones. I usually work with 3 gemstones at a time, like a trinity, and I'll put those gemstones that resonate well with the sign the moon's transiting through, or just the overall astrological forces that we're receiving, and put them on top of my journal. I put that journal on a windowsill so that when the moon transits by my journal, that energy is making that connection. Okay, so there's that. Now, this sign of Virgo, it's what we call the mutable earth sign. Okay, now mutable means it comes with adaptability. The sign of Virgo is very adaptable. In fact, so adaptable, this sign of Virgo can have a tendency to hang out with all different types of people. There can be a little bit of judgment that comes from the sign of Virgo, but it still has this tendency to kind of be able to adapt into new situations, new environments, that sort of thing. But at the same time, because it's in the element of earth, this is the most grounded of all the mutable signs. The mutable signs are Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo. And out of all those very adaptable energies, the sign of Virgo tends to be the one that has the most ability to stay consistent with things. These mutable signs are wonderful for being adaptable people. Sometimes when you've got a ton of mutable energy in your natal chart, it's like you don't necessarily want life to constantly be changing, but it just does. Okay, for all that mutable energy coming through. And sometimes when we've got a heavy dose of mutable energy, either just in our chart or if we're receiving a ton of mutable energy from the heavens, then it can be difficult to stay on track with a goal that we're going after. It's like we're going after a goal and all of a sudden something seems more exciting over this direction. Oh, wait, I'm going to go over here and check this out. Oh, wait, no, I'm going to go over here and check this out. So that's something to be mindful of. Okay, now also the sign of Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Okay, now Mercury is such a fascinating character. I have spent so much time studying Mercury over the past couple of years because I just realized wow, Mercury is so incredibly fascinating. Okay, Mercury rules both Gemini and Virgo. Okay, Mercury is a very busy character, and technically, you'll probably hear me refer to Mercury as a he, or I'll just describe this as a he energy. However, technically, Mercury is a hermaphrodite. Okay, the archetype tends to show itself as a masculine energy, but it is. And by the way, the sign of Virgo is actually a feminine energy because it's an earth sign. But when I say he, when I'm referring to Mercury, just understand that my head just goes straight to that because the archetype presents itself with masculine parts. Okay. But anyway, this Mercury energy is technically a hermaphrodite. And in fact, Mercury is Hermes. Okay. In Greek mythology, Hermes is the messenger of the gods. And by the way, in Norse mythology, Mercury is Odin. Okay. Mercury is associated with Wednesday. The word Wednesday actually comes from Odin's day. It's at Odin. Okay. Odin's a strong character. If you don't know who I'm talking about, you might want to look into Odin. But also, Mercury is Thoth, or I've also heard it being pronounced as Thoth in Egyptian mythology, who's also basically a messenger of the gods. Okay. Most commonly, people refer to or make the connection between Hermes, Greek mythology, and Mercury. Okay, now what this messenger of the gods does is basically we are always receiving information. Whether you are just walking down the street or having a conversation, reading a book, looking on social media, watching a movie, whatever it is, your mental function is going, it's ticking, it's going. And that's Mercury receiving the information. Now, Mercury's got to take that information in and put basically a hashtag on it and file it away somewhere into our consciousness. And with that said, in the sign of Gemini, like I said, Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. Sign of Gemini is the sign of communication. Mercury's job through the sign of Gemini is to find that file and bring it back out so that we can communicate the information that we already received. In the sign of Virgo, it's this sign of being organized, keeping things organized. It has a lot to do with being of service and physical health, and I'll get into that. But this sign of Virgo, like if you were to just do an internet search for Virgo keywords, you'd probably find the word organized, okay? Because Mercury's got to stay organized. And people who have a good, strong Mercury or Virgo energy in their natal chart tend to be good at keeping things organized, okay? Sometimes we'll have very strong mental function, or if it's a very debilitated Mercury, then they don't have very strong mental function. But this Virgoan mercurial energy is very much, it's intellectual, it's highly intellectual, but also keeping the mind organized and clean. Okay. Now, this sign of Virgo is represented by the Virgin. Okay. The Virgin, that doesn't mean that just because somebody's a Virgo that they're a virgin, by the way. I mean, I would assume people would realize that, but I've actually had some clients be like, what? I'm the sign of being a virgin. It's not necessarily about being a virgin, okay? It's more about the purity that comes with that virgin energy, okay? This wanting things to be pure and clean. The sign of Virgo, certainly not everybody who's their sun in Virgo is going to be organized and super pure and that sort of thing. A lot of times I notice people with a Virgo rising. In fact, I just got done with a client who's a Virgo rising with such a pure looking face. I notice a lot of Virgo risings have these very pure, sort of innocent looking faces. Okay. Now, also this sign of Virgo, it has a lot to do. In fact, this is harvest season. The sign of Virgo has a lot to do with harvesting the fruits of the material world. Okay. Now, I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I've been harvesting stuff out of my garden like crazy and just absolutely loving it. I will say this though, sometimes I like to push the limit a little bit because the sign of Libra comes in after the sign of Virgo. And sometimes I'll push it out a little bit because I want things to be extra ripe and wait till the sun moves into the sign of Libra. But generally speaking, especially the end of Virgo season, the end of summer, which is where we're at, this is when things are ready to be harvested. Okay. And that has a lot to do with service. Okay. You're going out and you're being of service to the world. You're harvesting the fruits of the material world. The sign of Virgo is very strongly associated with being of service. Not only that, but when you think about it, it's like, of course, not everybody's going to be like this, but a lot of people who have their own garden and grow their own food and that sort of thing, they'll go out and they will just analyze like is the tomato perfect yet? Should I wait till tomorrow? I want it to be perfect. The fruit, the plum or whatever it is, the apple. And that sign of Virgo can be like that, can be very analytical, like, oh, I just want it to be perfect. Okay. I want that fruit to be perfect. A lot of times people with a heavy dose of Virgo energy in their natal chart want things to be perfect. They want them to be clean. They want it to be pure. They want it to be perfectly ripe. Not only that, but this sign of Virgo, it has a lot to do with the fact that Mercury rules it, has a huge influence on our nervous system. And I'll go into this a little further when we start talking about the parts of the body that Virgo rules, but there can be this tendency to like almost, it's a nervous earth sign. And that nervousness can even come from almost being too analytical. Okay. Now I do happen to know I have a lot of Virgo friends, and it's funny because I'm a Pisces, which is opposite Virgo. And I feel like sometimes it's like, I crave this Virgoan energy in my life because I crave the being organized. And I love the fact that this energy tends to really be of service. Okay. A lot of times the sign of Virgo is very strongly associated with the sixth house in the natal chart. And that sixth house can have a lot to do with being of service. And so I notice a lot of people have either got a ton of Virgo energy in their natal chart or have a very busy sixth house in their natal chart, will have this very strong tendency to work a service position, whether it be being a bartender or a waitress or a mechanic, any kind of service position. You're being of service to the world. Okay. Now, also the sign of Virgo overall is really the sign of physical health. Okay. So overall, hearing all these things, how do you want to grow in these ways? How do you want to be of service in the world? Maybe you want to, up the ante with how you're being of service. Or also, how many of us want to start taking better care of our physical health. This is an incredibly powerful time to manifest new, healthier, or more pure, or more clean new beginnings. And I'm not just talking about, yes, of course it could be applied to, I want to clean my house. You know, I want my desk to be clean, or I kind of have a little bit of clutter on my desk right now. I think I might use this new moon in Virgo to do this organization stuff, but also cleaning the insides of our body, flushing things out, flushing out our intestines and our liver. And again, I'll go a little deeper into this later on in the recording. But in case I lose you, I want you to understand how strongly associated this sign of Virgo is with our physical health. This is an incredibly powerful time to manifest new, healthier beginnings, or cleaner beginnings, or again, also being of service. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's go ahead and pull up the chart here. Let's start going through this stuff. Okay, so for those of you who are new to my recordings, what I work with is geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this new moon. Okay, with geocentric, we put Earth right here in the middle. These symbols right here are the symbols for the planets of the celestial bodies. Like here's the sun, okay, here's the moon, here's Mercury, here's Venus, up here is Mars. When we go in the wheel a little way, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these things are going to be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this new moon. And for those of you who take the time to look this stuff up for yourself based on your own location, what you're going to find, of course, unless you're living somewhere near Santa Cruz, California, what you'll find is it'll look different, because this is based on my location. Like here is the sun, here is the moon. We can see they're at 21 degrees Virgo. Okay, this right here is a symbol for Virgo. Now, that's for everybody. It's for everybody on Earth using Western astrology. The sun and the moon are going to be at 21 degrees Virgo. However, if you're over in New York or just in the East Coast or something, then the sun and the moon might be somewhere down here. Or if you're over in the UK or something, they'll be over here. It depends on your location. But again, because the whole zodiac's going to turn based on your location. However, we all experience this new moon at 21 degrees Virgo. Now, anytime that we have a new moon, it means that the sun and the moon have come together to create a new beginnings. Okay, it's like they are making a baby. The moon in Western astrology, the moon is considered the mother of the heavens. The sun is the father. So here they come together to make this energetic baby that grows over the next 6 months until we have a full moon in the sign of Virgo. That's why this is a time for new beginnings. Okay, and I really mean it when I say that I have manifested some incredible things into my life working with this moon magic, this very particular. And yes, of course, there's other ways we can go about this. Just again, for those of you who are a little more advanced, we can also start you on new beginnings based on your own specific natal chart, the distance between the sun and the moon when you were born. Of course, there's all different ways to do this, but as an excellent general rule of thumb, this is like real true magic. Okay. Now, let's see here. So 21 degrees Virgo, this puts us in something called the third decan of this Virgoan energy, which actually gives it a little twist of Taurus energy as well. Okay, now Taurus is the fixed earth sign. With that said, that stabilizes this a little bit. It helps to kind of, the sun is in the last 10 degrees of this Virgoan energy. So it's blending in with the very stable bull. The sign of Taurus is the bull. So that's nice. Now that's another thing that can be very much applied to the sign of Taurus. Also has a lot to do with agriculture. This is such a good time to be harvesting all of the stuff that we've been working on growing. And if those of you who don't have a garden, that's perfectly okay. I just happen to be an avid gardener. So that's why I like to talk about this sign of Virgo so much. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's talk about this guy over here. This right here is Uranus. And by the way, yes, like pretty much everything's in retrograde except for Venus and Mars. Anything that can retrograde is in retrograde except for Venus and Mars at the time of this new moon. And one of the big ones, this right here is Uranus, is in retrograde. Okay, now when Uranus, in my very strong opinion, out of all the retrogrades that we can experience, Uranus retrograde tends to show itself most prominently. Like Uranus influences, just in and of itself, Uranus influences very abrupt things. Like Uranus is very, it's revolutionary. Okay, Uranus says, I don't like the old ways of doing things anymore. We need to have a new way. We're coming up with a new, in fact, Uranus rules things like technology, okay? Things like the internet. Uranus also has a lot to do with kind of doing things with the whole tribe, like networking with other people to make things come into fruition, that sort of thing. But it's this kind of abrupt energy. I notice a lot of people who've got Uranus right next to their rising sign tend to be very abrupt people, like they'll interrupt people. Not that they're trying to be rude or anything, but that's what Uranus influences. Things like an interruption, like what the heck, where did that come from? And a lot of times it can have a lot to do with technology. Okay. A lot of times when we're having a heavy Uranus transit, we can experience things like all of a sudden the computer stops working, or all of a sudden Zoom shut down, or whatever. That's happened to me several times when Uranus has been on the horizon. Okay. So the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on this is because when Uranus goes retrograde, he's even more abrupt. He's like, he's very electrical. Okay. Uranus has a huge influence on our electrical bodies. Okay. And here we have the sun and the moon at 21 degrees Virgo. And here we have Uranus in retrograde, extra strong dose of abruptness at 22 degrees Taurus. These are very, very strong trines. I'm pointing out these blue lines right here. That's approximately 120-degree angle. And Uranus, basically, Uranus is having a conversation. Uranus is in retrograde and going wacky, is having a conversation with this new moon. Okay, so there might be this tendency for things to go a little wacky, but you can also utilize this. First of all, with all these retrogrades, it's an excellent time to be reevaluating whatever's being triggered in your natal chart by these retrogrades. Okay, whatever, there's more than likely when we have this many retrogrades going on, it's hitting something in your natal chart. Okay, and whatever it's hitting, it's time to reevaluate whatever that particular celestial body that it's triggering influences. Okay, and I get it, a lot of people this is going to go way over some people's heads, but for those of you who have been studying this stuff for a while, if you notice that there's a celestial body going retrograde over, say, your sun or your moon or your Venus or your Mars, blah, 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 whatever it is, that's, you take the energy of that particular celestial body that it's retrograding over and realize, okay, what do I got to reevaluate in my life that's applied to this energy? Okay. And just, that's again, a really good general rule of thumb to take into consideration when we've got this many retrogrades going on. Something in your life is more than likely having to kind of, you almost like have to redo it. Okay. So there's that. I feel like there's something else I was going to say about that, but we'll leave that there for now. Okay. So let's see. Next, we'll talk about Venus, who's no longer in retrograde. Okay. Venus was in retrograde. I can't even tell you how many Leo people have had some really funny things. I shouldn't be laughing. So it's not funny for some people. But it's just interesting to observe. And it's always comical to see how real astrology is. Venus influences love, relationships, beauty, harmony, any female, okay? Whether you are male or female or whatever, that if you have a female in your life, whether it be your sister or your best friend, not mother though, the moon is associated with mother. Venus is like she's very strongly associated with the females in our life. Okay, now I know a lot of Leo men out there, because Venus retrograded over their stuff, like their girl left them, or it's the other way around, the guy who left a girl. Oh gosh, it's Venus is very, very strong in the sign of Leo, but she's moving forward now. Okay, she's moving forward. And people are coming back into people's lives. And I'm talking about clients here that I've just been hearing a lot of Leo people talk about these things. Even something with the sisters. I have a client who's had a very big problem with his sisters. And now it's getting better once Venus started moving forward. So there's that. But in the sign of Leo, she's extravagant. Okay. This Leo energy is like, it's the king of the zodiac. Okay. It's a sign of royalty. It's a sign of bravery and courage, but also playfulness. Okay. It's the lion. The sign of Leo is represented by the lion who is courageous, but also totally playful. Okay. And there's the influencer of love and beauty going through the sign of Leo. So she's very extravagant here, and she can certainly be playful. But if you're a Leo and you've had some weird stuff going on in your life, either just within your relationship with somebody, especially if it's a female, and you've had some stuff going on that was kind of like, what in the world just happened here? More than likely, it's going to unfold with a little more grace now that Venus is moving forward. Okay, now, and not only that, but there is a little bit of a grin. Oh, no, that's just for my location. Sorry, I'll stop there. Okay, so this right here is Mars. Mars is like basically Venus's big, strong boyfriend. Okay. Mars is, rules over our muscles and our adrenal glands. Mars is aggressive and masculine. Okay. Like red hot energy comes from Mars. Well, Mars is going through the sign of Libra, which Libra is the sign of balance and fairness and justice, relationships. Okay. Now, Mars is a little debilitated here, because Mars wants to be done. Mars is like, get out of my way. I got war to go to. And Libra is like, well, no, we got to be balanced here. It's almost like the sign of Libra will slow Mars down a little bit. Mars might not be so stoked to be in the sign of Libra. But the really beautiful thing here, I have one of my very best friends, his Mars is in Libra. And I just love this energy. It's almost like it refrains from the aggression. Okay. The aggression that can come from Mars, Libra's like, chill, bro. Okay. So this is actually kind of a nice transit and might be good for some relationships. Everything I say here is going to totally depend on your own natal chart. Okay. Of course, what I try to focus on is what we're receiving as a collective, but please just always consider that we do all experience this stuff incredibly uniquely. Okay. If you've got anything near, let's say if you're a Libra, if your sun is in the sign of Libra, especially anywhere near 11 degrees, say it's anywhere between, let's say 7 degrees and maybe 16 degrees or so, that's your sun. You got Mars revving you up right now. Like that's great for you Libras. I love Libra energy. I have a bunch of Libra energy in my natal chart. In fact, my last name, Wage, actually means Libra. Okay. I'm very drawn to this energy. Actually, I have a thing for Libra risings. They all come into my life. And I think it's because it's this very charming energy, Libra, the sign of balance and harmony and relationships and partnerships, and beauty is also very strongly associated with this sign of Libra. Where was I going with this? I think I was just talking about how Libra sometimes people with their sun in Libra, certainly not all of them, but some of them can have a tendency for laziness because it is such a chill, laid back sign. And not only that, but sometimes Libra energy can have a little bit of a lack of sense of self. Again, please, if you're a Libra, I'm not trying to tell you that you have a lack of sense of self, because it's not going to be every single Libra, because there's so much more to the natal chart. However, that sign of Libra in and of itself, especially sun in Libra, can have a little bit of a lack of the sense of self, because it's the sign of partnerships. It's the sign of the other person included. Okay. So that laziness can manifest that way. Well, Mars is like, no laziness here. Mars is like, let's get up and get stuff done. Okay, so there's that. Now we've also got, well, where should I go next? For now, actually, let's talk about Jupiter for a minute. So here's Jupiter going through the sign of Taurus. I believe that Jupiter is going to be in Taurus all the way until May of next year. The end of May of next year, Jupiter is going through Taurus. Jupiter is the great benefic, the bringer of abundance and wisdom and philosophy and luck. And Jupiter is a wonderful energy. However, anything he touches, he expands it. Okay. He's making, I use this term a lot, but he really does. Anything he touches, he's got to make it a bigger deal. He could be aggressive. Jupiter is actually Thor in more Norse mythology with the hammer. Okay. So Jupiter can be aggressive, but for the most part, Jupiter is this wonderful energy. And going through the sign of Taurus, again, is the bull. Taurus is actually very strongly associated with money, material possessions, and values. I do think especially since Jupiter and Uranus are going through the sign of Taurus together until May of next year. Uranus is in Taurus, I believe, all the way until 2026. Might be late. No, I think it is 2026 that Uranus is going through Taurus till. But again, Uranus influences technological changes a lot. And it's a certain point later on this year, I believe it's going to be, or maybe early next year, Jupiter and Uranus are going to be next to each other, and that Jupiter is going to make this Uranus and Taurus a bigger deal. Okay. And Taurus is actually the sign of money. I do think that there's going to be something that happens within maybe even just the next year or so. I do think that something's going to happen that involves finances. There's going to be some kind of like a big, I don't know, they'll probably come out with some digital currency that doesn't necessarily benefit anybody except for those at the top of the pyramid, if you know what I'm saying here. But if you don't know what I'm saying, that's perfectly okay. Some of you will, some of you won't. But this Jupiter is retrograding through the sign of Taurus. There's another thing. Okay. If you got something strong in your natal chart, really anywhere between like 5 degrees, even less than that. Honestly, if you just have anything strong in the sign of Taurus, because Jupiter and Uranus are both going retrograde, and Jupiter, I believe, is in retrograde till December. Okay. So there's going to be a like big opening of this Taurus energy that's receiving this kind of like wacky Uranus energy, but then also Jupiter, which again, for some people, for some of you Taurus people out there, Jupiter might be bringing you big luck, but for some of you might be making what's already kind of troublesome or abrupt even more of a big deal. Okay. So there is that. All right. Now this poor sign of Taurus has really just been getting hit hard. Thank goodness the North Node is out of there. Okay. So let's just talk about the nodes right now, since I just brought up the North Node. Okay. So here's the North Node. Here's the South Node. You guys have probably heard me talk about these nodes a million times, but for those of you who are new to my recordings, this North Node is where energy comes in. Okay, this is where the celestial pump that brings energy in comes through the North Node. South Node, that's what drains energy out. Okay, that's where the celestial energy, the tides are flowing out. Okay, now just back in July, the North Node moved into Aries and the South Node moved into Libra. These guys are always opposite each other. No, they are not planets at all. They're points that sit on the moon's ecliptic. Okay, and in fact, I have, if you want to learn more about the nodes, I do have a video somewhere back on YouTube. You just have to go back maybe sometime in July if you want to learn more about the nodes. Anywho, so since this, okay, Aries is the sign of aggression. Okay, it's ruled by Mars. Aries is the warrior of the zodiac. It's the ram. It'll ram what's in its way. It's a very strong energy. It's the sign of self. Okay, now the beauty of this North Node coming through the sign of Aries, again, the North Node was in the sign of Taurus. That's what I was saying. Oh my gosh, this poor sign of Taurus has been getting hit so hard, kind of going back into January of 2022. But this North Node moved into Aries. Now we're receiving this Aries energy, which can be fantastic for like, I need to go do this. For those of you who have your sun in Aries or maybe an Aries rising, you're receiving a load of celestial energy right now. Depending on your karma and depending on how it's hitting your natal chart, it could be a great thing. But then for some of you, it might be like overload, you know, so keep that in mind as well. Now, the South Node over here, where energy is going out, is in the sign of Libra, which Libra is a sign of justice and fairness and balance and that sort of thing. Harmony, beautiful things come from the sign of Libra. And that's where the drain point's going through. These nodes are going through these zodiac signs all the way until January of 2025. So this South Node going through Libra might not, if you've got strong stuff in your natal chart in the sign of Libra, it's probably trying to take something out of your life. Anything. It could seriously be something as simple as, oh my gosh, I need a new phone. I have to get rid of my old phone, you know, that sort of thing. Or it could be anything again, if you got basically your sun in the sign of Libra, or if you're a Libra rising, the celestial energy is trying to drain something out of your life through this South Node. But this as a collective, the sign of Libra, isn't this interesting that these nodes are going through these zodiac signs as we have an election coming up next year? Not that I'm not one that likes to get involved in politics at all. I do everything I can to not participate in that stuff. However, being an astrologer, I like to watch this stuff and learn about it. I like to learn about the candidates' natal charts and see what's going on and that sort of thing. But this South Node, the drain point going through the sign of justice, doesn't seem like such a wonderful transit for an election time. And the North Node going through the sign that really kind of represents like war and aggression, where energy is coming in. Yeesh, that's a little weird. Don't mean I really say this with confidence. Everything is going to be okay. Okay. The world has been through tougher times than what we're going through now. We're so seriously and obviously going through a very, very powerful transformation. Okay. All of us as a collective, we're literally going into a new age. And that, the term new age kind of, has like kind of a bad rep. I've heard a lot of people be like, oh, it's new age bullshit. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to swear on YouTube, but if you can take away the stigma that's put on this new age thing, which I totally understand. I totally get it. But at the same time, we're literally going into a new age. We're going into the age of Aquarius. Things are changing. This is something that it's like every 2,160 years or something like that we change the age that we're in, and we are going. So it's a long, long time until we go into a new age. And that's what we're going through right now. So it's very, very powerful. All right. So now I'm getting rambly on this one, aren't I? All right. This right here is Chiron going through the sign of Aries all the way. I believe that one's till 2025 as well, which again, Aries is the sign of self. Chiron is the wounded healer who wants us going through Aries, wants us to heal ourselves. And that's another one that's going to be probably later on this year, towards the end of this year, or early next year. The North Node and Chiron are going to be conjunct. The energy that pumps in, the valve that pumps celestial energy in, is going to be right next to the wounded healer, okay, in the sign of self. This can, again, so much depends on our own natal chart and our karma and our, human free will choices in life. But this can be a wonderful transit for healing ourselves. Okay, so there's that. Where should we go next? We'll go on over here to Neptune, who's going through Pisces. That one's all the way till 2025. Now, Neptune rules Pisces, works comfortably here. Very, very spiritual energy, but sometimes a little too spiritual. Okay, sometimes a little like kind of drifting off into daydream land or altered states of consciousness. Okay, if you got anything in your chart near 26 degrees Pisces, you're probably having a very, very, very spiritual some sort of situation in your life where it's either a strong spiritual practice or something's going on. Your intuition's heightened up to crazy heights. Okay, but it also sometimes, in fact, I just gave a reading to a Pisces who's got 26, it was something near 26 degrees Pisces. And this particular client was telling me that they took an incredible amount of THC, just getting so high on THC, which I have no problem with THC. I've said it a million times. I love cannabis. I grow cannabis, and I actually have a really good, strong relationship with cannabis. But it's almost like this certain individual was getting so drawn into not like escapism. That's the word I'm looking for, escapism. Okay, or like delusional energy, but it is a very spiritual transit. Okay, so if you do have anything near 26 degrees Pisces in your chart, just be very careful about, what you're putting that spiritual energy towards, so that you can benefit from this transit rather than end up, becoming hooked on something or something like that. All right, enough of that. Here's Saturn in Pisces, which Saturn brings the restrictions, the limitations, the responsibilities, the discipline. That's Saturn's job going through Pisces. I've said this before too. And by the way, all these things are in retrograde. Saturn, Neptune, the nodes are almost always in retrograde. Chiron's in retrograde. Jupiter's in retrograde. Uranus is in retrograde. Mercury is in retrograde. Mercury goes stationary the day after this new moon, by the way. But so all these things are retrograding. It's like there's a certain it's almost like they work with more strength when they're in retrograde, kind of like it's more strength, but it's just not, the flow is not just think about it this way. When we're driving a car backwards, we don't drive as gracefully. It could be a little bit of a basket case driving backwards. Okay. So Saturn going, and that's all these things are doing that. Saturn going through Pisces may be trying to bring in some discipline to this sign of Pisces. If you have anything near 2 degrees Pisces in your natal chart, there's probably something going on in your life where there's limitations being placed on you, or all of a sudden you got hit with a boatload of responsibilities that you don't want to deal with, but you have to deal with. That's what Saturn does, but he's in retrograde too. So it's like, it's kind of a weird energy going on. So that's something else to keep in mind. Okay, so let's move on up here to Pluto, also in retrograde, going through the sign of Capricorn. Okay, now Pluto is the destroyer, okay, but brings power. Pluto is sometimes referred to as the planet of power. Well, that's because he can make people powerful, but only through a process of transformation, like having to flush out what's no longer working for you to bring in new powerful beginnings. That's Pluto's influence. Pluto actually even influences things like sewage because it's trying to flush things out. Now, in this going through retrograde, we got the Pluto's Hades in Greek mythology. Okay, that's the ruler of the underworld. So we've got the ruler of the underworld driving backwards through the sign of Capricorn. So Capricorn is actually the sign of structure. It's the sign that rules over things like authoritarian establishments, things like government, things like the structures of our cities, like literally the structure of the buildings and the streets and how they all work out. Like masonry, the sign of Capricorn could be very strongly associated with building things. Okay. Now Pluto is creating a totally destructive energy through those things, through the structure of our civilization. He's almost done. He'll be done in that sign of Capricorn in December of 2024. He's been in there since 2008. Okay, we've seen a lot of destruction to the structure of our civilization, but he's working kind of extra forcefully right now because he's going through the sign of Capricorn. That's another thing that I do think is going to be very interesting to observe for next year's elections, because Pluto is going to be at the 29th degree, and at a certain point retrograding, like right around when I say the 29th degree, that's the anaretic degree where things are very powerful, okay, very forceful, and in retrograde right around the time of these elections next year. So that is going to be wild. Did I forget about Mercury? Let's talk about Mercury. So Mercury is in the sign of Virgo, which I love Mercury in Virgo because he rules the sign of Virgo. There you go. I told Mercury, he rules the sign of Virgo. So he's in his own home and he's working comfortably there. Okay. So this can be very good for our mental function, especially since Mercury is, he's kind of like a key player for this new moon, seeing as though the new moon is in the sign of Virgo and Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Okay. But it is in retrograde. Again, this is time to reevaluate. If you've got anything in your natal chart near around 8 degrees Virgo, definitely your mind is having to almost, again, don't mean to be repetitive here, but like reevaluating something. Okay. But however, Mercury goes stationary, the retrograde will be over the day after this new moon. Mercury's retrograde will. Okay, so I think I covered everything I wanted to. We talked about the most prominent aspects that we see here. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. Talk about body parts. So the sign of Virgo actually rules the liver and the intestines. Okay, so obviously very important parts of our body. This is definitely not a time to be putting stuff into our body that is going to be difficult to digest. People just don't understand this. Everybody has parasites, okay? Every single person, I don't care how healthy you eat, I don't care how well you wash your food, especially if you have any kind of pets, we all have parasites, okay? And a lot of those parasites live in our intestines and also in our liver, okay? They can live all over us, even in our brain, okay? Some people are going to be completely, honestly, sadly, I see it in people. I see the parasites. It's like they can't be themselves because they're being taken over by parasites. And there's probably a lot of people out there that are going to completely disagree with me, but this is stuff I know from my own personal experiences, not only with myself, but with others as well. Okay, so With that said, we really want to be mindful about, because these parasites can become like active in our intestines when we're having the moon transit. We're having the sun and the moon and Mercury all going through the sign of Virgo. So our intestines are sensitive during this transit. So be very mindful about what you're putting into your body. And again, also our liver is very sensitive during this transit. Now, I'm going to bring this up right now. I've mentioned this stuff before. I've been doing this stuff for years now. I think like since 2018. It's called RUG, R-U-G. Okay. Remove Unwanted Guests. That's what it stands for. I get it off of, I think it's davidwolfshop.com. If you just look up, do an internet search for RUG, Remove Unwanted Guests, you will find this stuff. Incredible intestinal support. It actually says intestinal support right there. Not only does this just support our intestines and the digestive stuff, but it also helps to remove those parasites. Okay. So with this transit, I wouldn't go overboard. I certainly would be very careful, especially if you've never taken anything like this before. It's a blend. Gosh, what's all in here? Am I going to be able to read this? The writing's really tiny. So it's blue, clove. And let's see, it's black walnut hull, which can definitely remove parasites, and wormwood can also remove parasites. But there's also chance of piedra in there, which is really great. It's got a huge amount of enzymes in it. The enzymes are so good for our intestines. There's also, it's by Global Healing, I believe it is, where you can get enzymes. I also like, what is it? Enzymatic Gold, I think it's called. I'm pretty sure it's called Enzymatic Gold Company. Those are the two enzyme, especially I myself, I don't have a gallbladder. Unfortunately, I had my gallbladder removed when I was in my late 20s, and I wish I would have known the stuff I know now, because I know I could have cleaned my gallbladder out without having to remove the whole darn thing, but I did. And so I have to be very, very careful really with my entire constitution, but I have to take enzymes. I don't have that gallbladder to produce the bile that helps break food down. And so that's in part why I know a lot about this sort of thing, because I have to know about it in order to stay healthy. But anyway, so this is really, really good intestinal support. Okay. Now, for any time, okay, it doesn't even have to be a Virgo transit. That stuff is excellent, but especially, I mean, I will definitely be utilizing that during this lunar transit. Another thing too is, as I mentioned, the liver, milk thistle can be really, really good for the liver. However, you do got to be a little bit careful, because if you take a bunch of milk thistle, it's either a tincture or a tea or whatever, and it flushes out your liver, because that's what milk thistle does. It's going to clean out your liver. But if your intestines are clogged up, okay, if you've got some sort of a blockage going on in your intestines, then what's going to happen is the stuff that was dumped out of your liver into your intestines is then just going to build up more parasites there, more gunk in your intestines. So it's kind of a good idea to do both of these things at the same time. Okay. Another thing is that the sign of Virgo rules the sympathetic nervous system. I think I mentioned this earlier, that this sign of Virgo, it's kind of like a nervous energy. So if you're somebody who's dealing with nervousness, the sign of Gemini can also do, I mean, really a lot of the zodiac signs can deal with nervousness, but particularly during this transit, while Mercury's retrograde for Virgo and all this sort of thing, if you find that your nervous system just is like, ooh, I mean, really, like I said, Virgo specifically rules the sympathetic nervous system, but opposing that, Pisces rules the parasympathetic nervous system. We've got Saturn and Neptune going through Pisces. So it's kind of like the nervous system could be a little, creating just strange overall nervous reactions. Okay. What I really like is something called hops. Okay. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up, but this is a hops tincture that from my wonderful friend Catherine, who sent that to me. But I've taken hops tincture for a long time because I know it's great for the immune system. You can also even indulge into things like just CBD or whatever, if it's just stuff that's, I really like CBD a lot. Of course, I like, when I'm talking about CBD, I'm talking about cannabidiol, which actually comes from a cannabis plant or a hemp plant. Obviously, I love THC, which is the psychoactive component of cannabis. But CBD is non-psychoactive. Okay. It's really good for the nervous system. For those of you who deal with serious, like nervous system issues, constantly nervous, I've seen some people where it's like they're almost shaking because they seem so nervous. I personally and I'm not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be a doctor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of medical advice. The only thing I'm talking about here is stuff that I have learned from my wonderful teachers over the years and stuff that I've actually experimented with myself, my loved ones, close friends, that sort of thing, and really been able to tap into what helps. Okay. But again, I'm not trying to offer you any kind of medical advice. And it's also so important for everybody to understand that every body is different. What works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's going to for sure work for the next person. Okay. So there's that. But I really like very, very low THC. If you live in the location where this is legal, Colorado or California or whatever, in a dispensary, you can get like little tablets or whatever. There's also gummies and chocolates and all sorts of wild things these days, but you can get something that's like 2 milligrams of THC, which is an incredibly low dose. Like most people won't notice it. Okay. But they will blend in. It'll usually something like this will have a very, very low dose of THC, but then has a high dose of CBD. That blend right there can be so massively beneficial for an overactive nervous system. Okay, lastly, with the body, I mean, really the sign of Virgo and Pisces together, this polarity that goes on between these two zodiac signs really just rules our entire immune system. So it's definitely not a time to be throwing back shots of tequila or whatever it is, people are doing to the bodies that's just not good for your body. It's this lunar transit is not a good time to be doing that. That's for sure, especially because we're trying to manifest new, stronger, healthier beginnings. Okay, so there's that. Gemstones. So really the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Virgo is a sapphire, which I question that because sapphire is actually blue sapphire is very strongly associated with Saturn. Yellow sapphire is associated with Jupiter. So I'm not really sure where that came from, but a sapphire could be lovely to work with for this lunar transit. However, I will say this. When it comes to these lunar transit, I really like working with the gemstones that are ruled by the celestial body that rules the zodiac sign that the moon is transiting through. That's going to go over some people's heads. But so this is Mercury's this is Mercury's zodiac sign, the sign of Virgo. Well, Mercury's stone is actually a emerald, a green emerald. Now, for some people, a green emerald can, yes, they can be quite pricey. You can probably find affordable ones that are raw or that sort of thing, but they can also, for some people, again, certainly not everybody, for some people, it might be overkill. It might be too much. But for some people, that green stone can be really good for the nervous system, something that's more affordable and similar energetic properties. Malachite, which I've pulled out so many times recently. I've really been working with malachite a lot lately. And in fact, right here, we've got a malachite. This is like an oil lamp. The oil's in here, and this is like a little wick up here. And that is malachite. This thing is so beautiful when all the lights are turned off. And I will probably be using that during this lunar transit. Really, the green stones just really work well with this mercurial energy. This right here is something called amazonite. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly, but that's a really beautiful green stone. Also, green tourmaline. I know this shows up as black on the camera, but it's if you bring it outside and shine it and look at it in the sun, this thing is incredibly gorgeous. It's a dark green tourmaline. This is like, I can't remember the name. It's a client actually bought this for me, and it's beautiful. And unfortunately, the camera doesn't really show how beautiful it is, but these are super, super sparkly stones. And it's like a blend of like chrysocolla and malachite or something like that. But just recognizing that this is a very mercurial type of energy, which again, can be great for the nervous system. So there's that. Now also, jasper actually works very, very well with this Virgoan energy, really any kind of jasper. But I'm thinking about the fact that this new moon is so strongly trining Uranus. I'm trying to think of something that helps to ground us out, which those green stones can definitely help ground us out a little bit. But like earth tone jasper can also be really good, very strongly associated with the sign of Virgo, but also for helping to keep us grounded. Okay. And for those of you who, not everybody's, I've just been collecting gemstones for so many years that I've got a lot of them. But it's so important to realize that basically, if we have like one gemstone, I don't even have a clear one over here right now, but if you've got like a clear crystal, this right here is amethyst. I'll just use that. Or this right here is citrine. Okay. So these guys are clear. This is a little darker. This is going to be a little bit more protective. But basically, the clear stones are going to amplify the energies. They're going to make them stronger. The darker stones, like this right here, which is, that one's tiger's iron, this right, like darker stones are going to be more grounding and protective. Okay. So if you're just starting to get into working with gemstones, I do like things that I recommend. Malachite and lapis lazuli are really, really good stones. Like if you're like trying to manifest gemstones into your life because you don't have any, I would start with just a piece of clear crystal quartz and a piece of maybe black tourmaline or whatever kind of dark stone calls to you. And if then maybe you could add on malachite or blue lapis lazuli. Those are all really wonderful stones to have. But just keep in mind, like part of the reason I don't have any clear crystal quartz right here is because generally, unless I'm trying to show it to somebody, I don't like having the amplifying stones between myself and my electronic devices. I hope that made sense. Okay, I think I covered everything. I'm going to leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please visit erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.